Hi, this is Jay Holstine with Moving the Needle, and I'm really pleased today to have Morne Smit join me. Morne spoke with my group a couple weeks ago, and I'd say easily one of the speakers that our group just really identified with. Just the questions kept on coming. It was just a fantastic speaker session, and so with that positive reception by the group, I really wanted to try to schedule some extra time just to come back and ask kind of some repeat of some of the questions that were in the topic, but I thought they'd be really valuable to share throughout through my broader network. Anything that you kind of want to share about yourself with an introduction, or do you want me just to jump in? What do you recommend, Morne?
You know what I'm like, Jay. I don't think it's about me. I'm not sure anybody cares really what my background is, but maybe by way of 30,000-foot flyby. Originally from Cape Town, South Africa. I lived in the UK for 20 years. I'm now based in Miami, Florida, and I've really just it's been my life's work for 26 years to work with companies that are ambitious startups, scale-ups, mid-market companies, and I always say, kind of tongue in cheek, I don't have the autonomy on truth, but what I do have is 26 years of doing sales and nothing but sales, whether that be selling different industries, building sales teams, owning a couple of companies, and you'd have to be pretty slow not to learn something. So I'm always excited and willing to share with ambitious, business owners and sales professionals what I've learned, so maybe it can remove some of the trial and error for them.
I really liked the way you started your speech, which was that selling doesn't work. And so that kind of set the tone
Sure.
to get people in the right mindset that just, sitting there and with your bullhorn and kind of what I kind of think of as the inside out, speaking about what you think is important, doesn't matter because just like you said, what people care about is themselves. And so you have to quickly understand what they care about and think about it outside in. And that's a valuable perspective.
Yeah.
I know that with us, you kind of you hit two different topics. One is culture and another is the
Sales playbook.
sales playbook. Thank you. I was already thinking about how I wanted to word my next one, so I got lost. But with the culture, one of the things that really kind of got my mind in the right spot was when you talk about a sports analogy. I think it really kind of helps everybody kind of think about what is the culture they're setting up for their sales organization. Do you mind sharing that in a brief way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to your, to the original observation you made about selling doesn't work, I very often say, Jay, that people don't buy from us because they've understood what we've said. People buy from us because they feel understood. And I think that is, that's a takeaway that I would love the people watching and listening to this to take away and really think about that when you decide where you want to focus your time, your energy, and your money, right? So many companies that I meet are focusing a lot of energy and a lot of their capital on getting the sales message just right and training their salespeople how to say it, and going out into the market and telling other people why they should buy from us. I was doing a full day workshop in Buffalo last week, and we had a good 100 people in the room, and I grabbed one of the teams. There was 5 members, and I said, "Why do people buy from you?" "Oh, well, we're technically capable. We're very good at what we do. Our people make us different." And I said, "Well, what do you think your closest competitor says?" They're saying exactly the same thing. So, if the prospect, be it a sophisticated or unsophisticated prospect, is hearing the same things, the same value proposition from 2 different companies, then how are you really differentiating yourself? So maybe that's something that we can also talk about today. To the sports analogy, I'm a big believer that complexity is the enemy of execution. So whenever I speak, whenever I try to educate or share my experiences, I try and find metaphors that I think people can relate to. I try and find metaphors that they can go, "Oh, now I get it." And a lot of people are sports fans. I was a sports guy for some of my life. And even if you're not a big sports fan, you might have a spouse that likes to watch sports. So I think we can at least relate to the sports analogy. And what I often say is, sports teams are run better than most businesses. If you think about how the best sports teams perform during the course of a season, and particularly the ones that have had repeated success, there are certain things that are almost always true. When I talk about sales culture, I talk about mindset. I talk about expectation of success. I talk about the 6 inches between your ears. And I think we'll agree that great sports teams have normally got great coaches, which in the first instance ensure that the mindset of all the players on the team are at a level that they need. I mean, Ben Hurley, who's the famous coach from the Yukon Huskies, who won their second NCAA title this year in two years, he was interviewed afterwards and they said, well, what is the culture at the Yukon Huskies? And he said, well, very simply, I want all of my players to think the same and to behave in the same way. Because what I'm interested in as their coach is not what they think they have to give. I want everything that they're capable of giving. Now, that might be extreme for a lot of businesses when they think about their sales team, but what it tells us is you need to influence the mindset and the behavior of your team the way that a head coach would do it for a sports team. And then I'm going to go on to talk about, really the 5 things that I believe are absolutely key that you need as a sales team, which you can learn from sports teams if you're going to be successful. The first one is preparation. Preparation is mandatory. There isn't a sports team at any level that will go into a game or a season unprepared. Practice. Man, I can't overestimate or overemphasize enough the importance of practice. I think I said to your groups when we met, if you're not practicing inside the organization, what are you really doing? You're practicing on live prospects. I find it even in my client companies, even in my own business. I'm in the habit of hiring really talented salespeople. I had a session with one of my salespeople today, incredibly bright person. She's very switched on. We went through something that I wanted to do. And then just before the call ended, I said, hey, why don't you and I quickly role practice what we've just learned? And it was amazing to me how much meat was left on the bone that the practice helped us to regulate and to sort out. The third thing is you have to keep score, not of the scoreboard. Top sports teams know that if you track the scoreboard, it's too late. I can't replay that quarter, that half, that game. What I need to be tracking are the leading indicators. Are we tracking the yards gained, the rebounds, the RBIs? What are we tracking so that I can get a feel for whether we might be successful in the future? But the majority of companies, growing companies, don't track leading indicators for their salespeople. They don't track the activities, the behaviors, the habits that might make you successful in the future. And then one I think that is often controversial, Jay, is when we talk about having a dedicated coach. And when I talk about dedicated coach, I think it's obvious that a successful sport team will have a dedicated coach. We don't see a lot of championship, playoff winning sports teams that have no head coach, but one of the players kind of wears multiple hats. Yet with growing, scaling companies, we very often see a CEO, entrepreneur, president, who's also the de facto sales manager and might even also be selling. So really what I mean when I say you need a dedicated coach is I mean you need a sales manager who does not sell. And then the final and fifth thing that I think we can learn from sports teams is the playbook. There isn't a successful sports team on a court, a rink, or a field that would go into a game without a playbook. And what is a playbook in business terms? It's a collection of best practices. If you have 3 salespeople and one of them is consistently better than the others, well, then a simple question would be, what is that one person doing that the other 2 are not? How do we capture that? How do we codify that? How do we coach that to the other 2 so that we can have more consistent performance across that entire team?
Absolutely. No, those are 5 really, really valuable things. And I think I guess what I'd like to do, just because of the shortness of time that we have,
Sure.
is the 2 that I'd like to kind of go into a little bit more detail on is one is the role practice. Because I think that, I've been a part of sales organizations, and I've never been a part of an organization that had the discipline around role practice that you advocated.
Right.
Would you mind just kind of quickly kind of giving an overview in terms of,
Sure.
so the people that are listening to this kind of can get a picture in their own minds of what you mean by role practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it'll help if I just draw on this piece of paper behind me. I won't go into the whole long thing that I talked to you about the first time, but maybe as a visual aid, I think that role practice works best when you have 3 people. You need somebody that sits in the seat of the salesperson, someone that sits in the seat of the prospect, so someone that has to pretend to be the prospect, and then you need an observer. And the observer role is often the one that we skip or we miss out. Oftentimes we'll have a salesperson and maybe a sales manager, and they'll do what they call role play, which, that's fine. That's better than doing nothing. But I famously always say that play doesn't make us better, right? Because as a golfer, I play golf, but I don't get any better because I don't practice. The time that I got better was when my wife, God bless her, bought me golf lessons, and a coach showed up and he filmed my swing. So the coach was the one who stood there, filmed my swing, and then showed me on the iPad, here's what you're doing incorrectly, and I need you to make these adjustments. So what we need when we role practice is we need purpose and intention. So what part of the sales process are we practicing? And then we need somebody that can give us a feedback loop. And it's ideal when that person is an observer who's not involved. So that's this kind of third role here. So the way that we do role practice, we advocate it, is that I say that even if you don't have 3 salespeople, you can still practice. Because remember, every conversation where you're touching a client, whether it be the initial prospecting, whether it be the discovery call, whether it is when you're talking about their budget or the solution that you're proposing, whether you're trying to close them, you're following up, if they're already a customer, the customer service calls you're having. I mean, even down to the cash collection calls that you might have when they may be paying you late. Those interactions are happening anyway. And if you're not closing your doors, if you're not stopping trading, then those conversations are happening anyway. The question is, would you like to practice internally so that you can get better before you do it externally? Because, Jay, we don't get any do-overs with live prospects. If I'm in front of a live prospect and I ask a bad question, that's it. I've painted myself into a corner. But when I'm practicing internally, I can get as many as I want.
I think I'd like to make one point and then give you an example. So the point is
Sure.
that then these people in this triangle rotate.
They do.
So each person kind of gets a chance to see it from another lens.
Yep.
And I think that's a very valuable component of your role practice.
Absolutely.
And then I think to really drive the point home for folks that watch this video is, why don't you just use as an example something like somebody has an objection to price, and like, you know, what an unpracticed person might respond to a price question versus a practiced person might respond to a price question. And I think that will be an example that 100% of the people on this that watch this video will relate with.
Absolutely. So here's an example that I see play out very often. You know, the person that sits in the sales seat gets to choose what they want to practice. They can tell the person sitting in the prospect seat what I want. So let's say I'm the person sitting in the sales seat and you're my prospect. We have a third-party observer observing. And I said to you, you know what, Jay, the one part of the sales process that I get stuck with habitually is I'm kind of hitting my stride and I'm doing my presentation. And then the client says, you know what, Morne, I love that, but it's just too expensive. So we've all had a price objection at some point.
Yes.
So what I often see play out is we get into a scenario where the salesperson gets a price objection. And if you're an unprepared salesperson, an unpracticed salesperson, then unfortunately, what I often hear salespeople say are things like, so Jay, you're saying that I'm too expensive. At what price point might this work for you? Or what are you comparing me to? Or can I offer you payment terms? Or can we maybe amortize the cost over a longer period of time? Or even worse than that, they get really defensive and frustrated and they immediately try and jump in and say, well, what do you mean we're too expensive? You know, we offer more value and, you know, our people make us different and we won all these awards. And they start spewing, you know, all these defenses to try and talk you into the fact that they're not too expensive.
Yes.
And what I often say is, well, if you are a prepared and practiced salesperson, then you have the confidence to slow down. And the first thing you should ask yourself is, what does too expensive even mean? So a prepared salesperson might say, Jay, thank you for that feedback. When you say that I'm too expensive, help me to understand what that means. Are you saying that perhaps the perception of value that I've created around this particular program doesn't match the price that I'm asking you to pay? Or does too expensive mean you don't currently have the budget to spend on this program? Now, first of all, I'd like to pause there and ask your listeners, is that a better quality question? Because these are two very different things. If somebody's saying, well, Morne, I've heard you, you know, but I just don't think it's worth the money. Well, that's something that you definitely should address. Somebody might actually be saying, well, when I said too expensive, what I mean is I fully agree that it's worth the money. I just don't have it. You know, it's like a Rolex watch. If you're a watch guy, you might say, well, no, I fully agree that that Rolex is worth $5,000. I just don't have $5,000 to spend on a watch. Or you might say, I've always thought that Rolexes are a bit of a brand. It's like a Cartier bag. It's not worth the money because it's the same engineering as an Omega, but it's twice the price. These are two very different things. So
Mhm.
first, what we teach salespeople is slow down, practice the questions, figure out what they're really saying, and then go again. So then you might come back and say, well, Morne, I feel like the value is there. I just don't have the budget. Okay, well, I don't yet understand fully what that means. So maybe I come back and say, hey, Jay, when you say you don't have the money, help me understand, is that a short-term problem or is that going to be a perpetual issue? So I guess what I'm asking is the budget going to roll over in the next quarter or maybe in the next fiscal year? Or are you telling me that you're never going to have the budget to spend on this program at this level? Because again, those are two very different things and they should be handled very differently.
Absolutely.
When you do role practice, you get as many do-overs as you want, right? The observer is sitting here kind of working out, what do I like? What advice can I give you? And if you and I were role practicing and you said you're too expensive and I immediately get defensive and say, yes, but, then the observer can jump in and say, Morne, breathe. Try asking a better question.
Mhm.
And then I go, well, what are you comparing me to? Yeah, that's not a very nice question. Try again, try again, try again, try again. And then eventually what we're trying to get to, Jay, is I have so many do-overs that I start getting a sense of which questions are getting me a better interaction. And now I have an elevated skill set that I can go and use in the open market. Once I have tested it with a live client, I put it in my playbook, and then I sharpen the saw. And ultimately, what we're after is what I always call the holy grail of sales. And that is, I want a sales team that have conviction that there is nothing that happens on a sales call that I can't anticipate before I get there. I always say, what I love to see is when I see salespeople, we sometimes have our client salespeople record their calls, and I can see them on these calls, and then they get an objection. It might be price. It might be you're not my preferred supplier. It might be I've got legacy relationships, whatever it is. And then that objection comes. And a practice salesperson, they don't flinch. They almost have this little glint in their eye. And you can see the little smile at the corner of their mouths. And I know that under the desk, they're doing a little mini fist bump because they go, well, I was waiting for the prospect to say that because they've practiced the answer. I love that. I think that creates incredible confidence. And as I always say, if you're practicing inside, that's how you get better outside.
Absolutely. And so I think a question that folks might have is how often and how long? Like we say practice, what do you mean? Like what amount of time per week or per month would you advocate?
Sure. I mean, look, if I had my way, if I had a magic wand, I'd love people to practice every day, right? Just like, Aristotle very famously said, motivation is like bathing. It doesn't last, so we recommend it frequently. Role practice doesn't last, so we recommend it frequently. Now, the minimum that I would recommend is once a week. It's 45 minutes once a week. I mean, you mentioned it's a very important point. It's 3 times 15 minutes. So you sit in each of these seats for 15 minutes. So it's 45-minute total time commitment. So I think I'm hoping that anybody that listens to this or sees this episode agrees that you have 45 minutes a week in order to be better at your day job. But you know what I find interesting about this, Jay, is that I teach it to people in sales, but it's actually applicable to any part of your business where you want to be better at an interaction internally or externally. So if you don't mind, in your groups, do you think this might be useful for members in your groups to practice this in other parts of their business aside from just sales?
So after you spoke with our group, we applied it immediately following.
Okay.
And so it was one of our members had concern with their boss, and so it had nothing to do with sales. It was an operational, but still, anytime you're practicing a contentious conversation and you're expecting some level of objections, and you kind of want to have that practice and those do-overs, so it's tremendously valuable, and so I think it can be applied. I think it's a best practice for sure. Um, I do think we're probably running short on time, and so I do want to get to I would like to pivot from this to something that I think will catch a lot of people by surprise. And I think one of the best ways to understand it is just kind of around however you want to frame it around having the sales manager not be a player. And so I don't know if you want to think about it in terms of the 3 cents or talk about
Sure.
your business or kind of where
Well,
you think it best fits. But I really think that's a key concept that I would love people to understand.
yeah, it's probably one of the more provocative things that I mentioned in that particular talk that I did for your groups. And it's around what we call the 3 sins of sales management. And the 3 sins are, number one, if the CEO, entrepreneur, president of the company also wears the de facto sales leader, sales manager hat. And that happens very, very often. And there's going to be people that hear me say that and immediately they think, yes, but I have to. We call that a 4-minute mile belief because there might be a little bit of limiting belief in there. And the reason it's a limiting belief is because it's very difficult for you to scale a company if you're wearing multiple hats. If we talk about what does a sales manager have to do, a sales manager role, irrespective of how big your sales team is almost always a full-time job. And the reason I say that is a sales manager really does 2 things. They build your team in quantity and in quality. So if you need to grow your sales team in order to grow your business, then even if you have 0, 1, 2 salespeople, I advocate for the fact that you still need a full-time sales manager because the sales manager is going to be spending a disproportionate amount of their time growing the team. That means running through a robust recruitment process, going through the talent pool, looking for new talent, building the virtual bench, doing sales assessments, doing culture index assessments, pre-screening people. There's about a 33-step process that you should be going through if you really are after A-player talent. So the sales manager is going to be running this touch system with all the best players in the market to try and pull the A players into your organization. And that, if you really do a breakdown of what those activities are, is a full-time job. Once you have 5, 6, 7, 8 salespeople, then the emphasis of what the sales manager is doing shifts to quality building. So now we're talking about coaching, we're talking about accountability, we're talking about performance management, we're talking about joint field sales calls, pipeline management, touch systems. So now you have a full-time role making sure that these 5 to 8 salespeople are performing at the highest level. You have consistent performance across the team, which includes, by the way, doing lots and lots of role practice, right?
Absolutely.
If you're the CEO and you're the de facto sales manager, in my experience across hundreds and hundreds of our clients in 7 different countries, you don't have the bandwidth to do this consistently. And I'm a prime example. Even in my current business, which is about to turn 7 years old, I made the mistake. I convinced myself that I would be the CEO, I would be a sales guy, and I would manage the sales team. And for the first 4.5 years, I did that until eventually my team came to me and said, listen, boss, respectfully, you're not doing a very good job. You're on the road a lot. You do lots of speaking gigs. You don't come to role practice. You're not here. And the team is suffering as a result. So we hired a sales manager into our company who does performance coaching, accountability, all that good stuff. And I get treated as a salesperson. So I'm still out there speaking, which is in essence a business development activity, but I get pulled into role practice. I get put into these seats and I have to play along so that other people can learn from me. And by the way, if there's anybody listening to this thinking, okay, I buy that, I'll tell you what, I won't be the CEO and the sales manager. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my best salesperson and I'm going to promote them to sales manager. I beg of you not to do that, or at least use extreme caution. Real data in all of North America, that's the US and Canada, if you take your best salesperson and you promote them to sales manager, that fails 82% of the time. And that's normally because the mindset it takes to be a great salesperson is the opposite of what it takes to be a great sales manager. A classic example, to use the sporting analogy, would be Michael Jordan was the GOAT, right? The best of all time as a player. How good of a coach? Wayne Gretzky, an amazing player. How good of a coach? It's not the same thing. To be able to perform at the highest level in sales is not the same thing as being out there and coaching other people to do it. And please, if you're going to buy into that, don't compound that mistake by taking your best salesperson, promoting them to sales manager, and then asking them to continue selling because you've told yourself that you can't lose the revenue. Then you're putting yourself into a position where that person is selling part of the time, trying to build the team part of the time. That's basically as bad as the CEO also being the de facto sales manager. You're cutting corners and you're not going to build what every growing company, in my opinion, is trying to build. And that is a repeatable, scalable selling system.
So fantastic. I have 2 points. One is that when you told the story, you also shared that when you finally brought in your sales manager, you had a near mutiny. Yeah. And that point really resonated with me because you can avoid the near mutiny if you have the sales manager in early.
Correct.
if people have gotten accustomed to, because you're a CEO and a sales manager, you don't have the time to micromanage is too strong. You don't have the time to really go, practice and do these things. Then you're basically, you're delaying those objections, because when
Yeah.
the sales manager comes in and does what he is supposed to be doing, these kind of high-end, what rainmaker kind of people will, feel threatened.
Mm.
And so I think kind of a really great concept that you use to really help the light bulb go on is you told a quick story about Moneyball. And in fact, I went and watched Moneyball again after you presented to us, because I just really wanted to fully absorb it all. And so maybe that would be one last thing in terms of trying to build these teams and thinking about a team and why you want the sales manager versus going out and hiring these best of breed salesmen that can kind of work by themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, in a nutshell, Jay, it's a great question. We often, when we're growing our businesses, we go out and we hire what I call unicorn salespeople. And what that means is you hire these salespeople where you're not even doing it consciously. Subconsciously, you're attracted to salespeople who feel like they are, quote unquote, self-starters, right? Or we often call them entrepreneurial salespeople, people that the entrepreneurs see something of themselves in that salesperson. And really what we're seeing is, here is a human that I think can get the job done without me having to babysit them. I don't have to manage you. I don't have to role practice with you. I don't have the time to do all these things. So I'm attracted to the fact that you feel like you're going to go out and get the job done, provided that I give you a good product, a little bit of training, a mobile phone, and a laptop.
Mhm.
The issue with that is when you try and build a repeatable, scalable selling system, these self-starter sales managers don't want to role practice. They don't want to be part of a playbook. They don't play well with others. So now you're trying to grow your team. You can't find, a steady supply of these unicorn salespeople. You have to start hiring what we call B players. So people that have got a great attitude, but maybe need, some more coaching and training and mentoring. But those two don't go together, because on the one hand, you have salespeople that are prepared to practice, be trained, be mentored, be coached, that are hungry like sponges for what you want to teach. You create a playbook, they will follow the playbook. And on the other hand, you have these tenured salespeople that you found when you were growing, and they go, role practice? Come on, Jay, that's for rookies. Playbook? Why would I want to follow a playbook? Are you looking for some kind of a robot army? I've got my own style. So like with Moneyball, when the Oakland Athletic had to say, well, we don't have the budget to hire people that can hit home runs, what we're going to do now is we're going to find players that can get on first base, because if we can do that statistically, we can win games. Oftentimes, what I see entrepreneurs get themselves into is a scenario where, you can't compete with the Amazons and the Apples and the AWSs of the world, where you're competing for the top sales talent. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to build extraordinary processes and systems, an extraordinary process, an extraordinary playbook, an extraordinary role practicing culture. Because when we do that, then I can hire people from outside of my industry. Maybe they don't know my product or service. Maybe they're earlier in their career. But what I can do is I can use my environment to upskill them really quickly. I can get them to follow my playbook. I can get them to role practice the best practices that we've learned. And then what I find is I get people with an amazing attitude, and they're good at their jobs. And that I can replicate. Now, instead of having just 5 salespeople, I can have 10 or 15 or 20, because I'm not being held ransom by these unicorn salespeople that are making me money, but their attitude is lacking. And they're almost holding me back as a business.
The word ransom is very important, because the true unicorn can go to your closest competitor and pretty much take their book of business with them. And that's obviously a risk, and not only a risk for you, the entrepreneur who owns the business or the founder owns the business, but it's also a risk for somebody who you might be trying to sell your business to.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that I think within my network and the Vistage community, most everybody is trying to build and scale a business with the idea of a liquidity event in the future. And so having a sales process that is supportive of that versus has risks associated with that is very, very important. Well, anyway, I truly appreciate your time. We covered the points that I was really hoping to get across, and I really appreciate your energy and sharing this. And so, how would folks who listen to this video, if they really kind of love and they relate to what you're saying, What do you recommend? How did they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So my company website is at the bottom of my little Zoom video window there. It's immersesales.com. So they can go to my website. They can have a look at what we do. There's a contact form there that you can fill out, and myself or somebody in the team will get in touch with you. As a speaker, you can just go to mornesmit.com, which is kind of here on my shirt, mornesmit.com. I have to put it in the shirt because it is an unusual name. But yeah, if you go to mornesmit.com, that's my speaking website. The two websites are connected. So that's probably the easy way to get in touch with me. And then the easiest email, if somebody just wanted to email and say, hey, I heard you speak, I'd like to chat more, is takeaction@immersesales.com. That goes to me, it goes to my whole team. So even if I'm traveling, somebody will reach out to you and get back to you straight away.
That is fantastic. Well, I do appreciate the time with you again this afternoon. Once again, I know my group really appreciated you coming and speaking with us, and I think several of them took to heart many of the concepts that you shared with us, and they saw how this could help take their businesses to the next level. So I
I
really
appreciate that. And what I love about the Vistage community, Jay, is, the real peer-to-peer support. What I observed in your groups was people that care about each other, that really want to share their experiences. And I think it's a wonderful thing that you guys do, to bring speakers in and to expose your members to that, because that's such a valuable resource. The entrepreneurial journey can be a lonely one, and it's certainly a tough one. So having peer-to-peer communities like you've created, I think, is something that I recommend to all businesses that I meet in my speaking journey.
That is well said. Thank you very much. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good to see you again.
thank you.